This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Anything Goes Friday here. The biggest news of the day. I mean, obviously, Tom Cotton and Sonny Perdue. I don't recall the president said that. They were in the room. Dick Durbin, yes, he said it repeatedly. These guys are cowards. These Republicans, they're cowards. There's a great post over at Democratic Underground by Mineral Man, who is no fan of mine, but nonetheless, he occasionally and frequently actually makes very good points. And this one in particular is brilliant. He says, Donald Trump is a punk. Runs his mouth constantly, but runs to hide behind others when he's called to account for his words. He can't defend himself, so he has Sarah Huckabee Sanders do it in her whiny style. Trump belittles and insults people, but only when they're not around to defend themselves. In person, his obsequious behavior towards others demonstrates his abject cowardice. When confronted by a leader of a country which is generally considered an adversary, he smiles and kowtows to that leader. He never confronts adversaries. Instead, he attempts to mollify them to prevent any confrontation. Instead of working on the many problems faced by our nation, he retreats to the golf course. He hides in his private quarters in the White House instead of working as most presidents have. He's afraid to appear in public because unless the audience he addresses is hand-selected and represents his sycophantic base. He does not stand before the press to speak because he cannot answer their questions. Our president is a stupid, cowardly punk. It is that simple. End of quote from Mineral Man over at Democratic Underground. I couldn't have said it better. And I'm not even going to try. Let's see here. Tracy in Florence, Mississippi. Hey, Tracy, what's on your mind today?
Yeah. You know, I've been hearing them talk for a while, like Adam Schiff and them saying that the Republicans keep blocking them and everything. They won't do investigations, won't let them subpoena witnesses and all. Could they not be charged with obstruction of justice? And if so, why isn't that being said more?
Well, it's going to be up to the prosecutors, and this is the stuff that's going to come out of the Mueller investigation. I'm guessing that evidence of actual collusion is going to be thin or hard to come by, but the evidence of attempted collusion is already what's just already in the public domain is massive. But I think that the things that the reason why Donald Trump didn't want to be president or expect to be president, at least according to Michael Wolff's book, I extrapolate the reasons as being he knows that he has a criminal past and, or at least a lot of shady deals, working with oligarchs, working with foreign dictators, working with people who are obviously doing money laundering. One of the main ways that people launder money is through real estate, through high-end real estate, which is the business he's in. And then, working with the mob in the construction business in New York. I think he figured that none of that stuff would ever come out because he wouldn't become president. He would just kind of fade into the history, and he and his family would just get all the fame that came from running for president. So
either that, or once he was elected, he figured since he was top dog, they could cover it all up.
Yeah, exactly, and he apparently actually believes that Bobby Kennedy covered up crimes for John Kennedy and that Loretta Lynch covered up crimes for Barack Obama. And he's so upset that Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III won't do the same for him. It's amazing. Paul in Lucerne, California. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. We're talking about Republicans here. And last time we talked about the Cross of Iron speech, I did some research on it. I always thought that was at the end of his presidency. It wasn't. It was at the very beginning of his presidency. And he was actually speaking to one world leader, the new leader of the Soviet Union. And he was telling them, hey, look, we got two choices. Choice A is we do this armament thing, or choice B is we go down the road of peace. Yep. And he laid out the benefits of both. I mean, just look how low. I mean, the Republican Party is no longer a viable political party. It's a cult. It's a taxation.
I think it's a RICO organization. Racketeering, influenced, organized crime.
Followers. Yeah, at the top. But they actually have cult followers. like the Trump guys that follow him and the people who watch Fox News. I actually think Fox News brainwashes people. I really do, because you cannot talk facts to a Fox News person.
Oh, watch the movie The Brainwashing of My Dad. Watch the movie The Brainwashing of My Dad. It's amazing.
I got Brainwashing of My Dad, and I show it to people when I'm talking to them about stuff like that.
Yeah. You're spot on. You're absolutely right. Thank you very much for the call. Frank in Aurora, Illinois. Hey, Frank, thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's on your mind? Frank? I got no Frank. Okay, let's try Chaz in Lakewood, Washington. Hey, Chaz, what's on your mind?
Na zdrovje, comrade, is another Glenn Trumpistan, is it not?
Strasvice. What's up, Chaz?
It's the J in Donald J. Trump stands for genius.
Right.
I want to ask you,
of course.
You remember the days when the GOP complained about debt panels instead of being one? You remember when the GOP complained about deficit instead of bloating it? You remember when the GOP fought the skis instead of work for them? And finally, do you remember when the GOP was the party of propriety instead of grade school bullies?
Yeah, I do. And it's and I would say to you that those times when the GOP was making those comments, that basically they were, the whole thing was a scam. They were trying to pretend that they were Democrats, and this is Harry Truman kept pointing this out. That every 4 years the Republicans suddenly get all concerned about stuff, and it's an illegitimate concern. They're going
to start big in the next 2-4 years, and their name is bad taste in the American mouth, for which we should be grateful.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they're imploding. Chez, thanks for the call. Let's see here. Russell in Chicago. Hey, Russell, what's on your mind? Thanks for listening to WCPT.
Yeah, Tom. What he said is, I don't, who cares? But last night you talking about Joey Reid. Yeah, the guy, I'm from Kansas. I went to Haiti and all that, and not 10 minutes later, turned around 360 and just blasted her. Hey, I'm with Donald Trump. He's the best we've ever had. The same thing with that girl in Utah from Haiti. Blisters him, but still will back him, no matter what his progress.
Yeah, you're talking about Mia Love, who is the first black woman elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in the history of that body, and she yesterday basically said, Donald Trump. I forget. Do you remember her exact quote? I don't want to misrepresent it.
Something about how dare he say this stuff about Haiti and all.
Right. Yeah, she was offended. I mean, her parents were Haitian refugees or Haitian immigrants.
Right. But the polling, Tom, 80% of this country now is anger, PO'd, and dissatisfied with these three.
Well, not just these three. I mean, it's right across the board. You got people. Congress,
the House, Senate.
Yeah, Congress has a lower trustworthiness score than career criminals. I mean, it's I don't know if that's actually true, but it's in the single digits. I mean, go ahead.
He is. Oh, and Tom, Morning Joe, he's cracking almost 70% think he's unfit. 4 out of 5 millennials will never vote for this guy again. This is a party that can fall to 20%, will say they're Republicans. By the time maybe 2022, it could be earlier. And what have they got left? The old white guys, and they can't even crack 70% of them anymore.
Yeah.
They're what, 64 to 68%?
Yeah.
I don't see how this party ever gets out with guys like Cotton running it.
Yeah. No, I agree. And the good news about Donald Trump is that he's saying out loud what the exact same party and the exact same politicians for 35 years have been saying in code. So I think we owe him a debt of thanks.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Donald, thank you so much for telling us the truth about your party. We'll be right back. Okay. Oops. I'm trying to track down that audio clip, but it probably should just stay with the phone calls here. Let's see. Paul in Wichita, Kansas, watching us on YouTube. Hey, Paul, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I wanted to get your thoughts on steady state economics. I contend that perhaps continuous economic growth equals economic cancer. Mm-hmm. And I can take your response on the air if you wish.
Well, let's define terms here. Steady state economics meaning trying to achieve a functional economy that does not rely on growth, but rather, simply kind of essentially recycles everything and maintains a good standard of living. That's what you're talking about, right?
Correct.
Okay. And that's, I'm not enough of an authority on this stuff to be able to speak really directly to it. I do think that growth for growth's sake resembles cancer. I agree with you with that analogy. But growth that is the consequence of improvements in technology that reduce the impact of that growth, arguably is a really good thing. I mean, we have in the United States right now more than twice the population and more than twice the economy that we had in 1960. I mean, literally, we've got twice the number of people. And so we've seen growth in population, we've seen growth in our economy, but our air is much cleaner. Our water is cleaner. Our factories, to the extent that we still have any, are producing far less pollution per product unit. So there are certain kinds of growth that can be actually productive for a society or for a country, and other kinds, obviously that aren't. And so I don't think that looking at these things in the abstract and saying we want steady state or we want growth or we don't want growth or we don't want steady, I think that's way too broad a brush to paint things with. Does that make sense, Paul?
It does. It makes lots of sense, but I can't help but think we need to bring the way you explained it, into the discussion of economic growth.
Yeah. Well, see, the reason why that so rarely actually becomes part of the conversation about economic growth is because what I'm describing is largely the product not just of innovation but also of regulation. And you'll find some economists, typically progressive economists, Paul Krugman or the modern monetary people, Steve Keen, folks like that, who would agree with what I just said. Others, particularly conservative economists, still believe in this theology, this religion of, there's this magical free market, and if we just let corporations do whatever they want, everything will be wonderful. And if you just let corporations do whatever you want, Lake Erie is going to catch on fire again. Or the Cuyahoga River is going to catch on fire again, and Lake Erie will be dead again. And that's not the direction that we want to go. And that was from the growth of the petrochemical industry, right? And the manufacturing industries around Lake Erie, particularly the Detroit area, just dumping their waste into the Detroit River, which drains into Lake Erie, and I believe. And so, I think we need smart growth, or we need a smart economy, and we need to define the parts of it that we want. I would like to see the solar industry, for example, grow substantially. I would like to see the fossil fuel industry wither away. So, whether those two balance each other out, I don't know. Paul, thanks for the call. Well said. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We are talking about the state of affairs here. I don't know how else to describe it. Paul in Castle Rock, Colorado. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. I got to say I love the show. And thanks to you, I'm getting solar panels.
Okay.
And
how did I facilitate that?
All your talk about Germany and all the. I just want to put it to the big company.
Mm-hmm. How's it working out, Paul?
I had to go through the HOA, the city, the electric company. I mean, it's quite a hassle to get it done. Mm-hmm. And it will probably take me about 10 years to pay it off.
Right.
And I think it's totally worth it.
Yeah, because after 10 years, the average lifespan of a solar panel is 50 years. After 10 years, your electricity is essentially free outside of occasionally replacing your batteries, right?
Yeah, And once again, I'm just, with all the Trump offshore drilling thing going on, whatever we can do to minimize that, I think is really important.
Well, there's not going to be a cause-effect relationship between the two, Paul, because the Republicans last year legalized the export of oil produced in the United States. It used to be illegal to export it. They said, no. We want the oil barons to be able to make fortunes all over the world with American oil. And that's why they're drilling like crazy. That's why Trump opened up Anwar. That's why he's got Ryan Zinke selling off Bears Ears and the Grand Canyon and any place else they can find a little bit of natural gas or oil. And of course, it's why he said you can drill off the coastal shores of the United States, because the oil companies can now take America's oil and sell it to other countries and keep the money themselves. We don't get much of it, but they sure make a fortune. But the solar panels, that's great. Paul, thank you for an inspiring story.
Hey, Tom?
Yeah.
Do you think with 2018 we can reverse some of those policies?
I absolutely do. And if everybody listening to my voice right now were to get, over the course of this year, over the course of the next 6 months, were to get just 5 or 10 friends to register and commit to vote, and make sure that your registration's intact if you live in a state controlled by Republicans, because they are purging millions of people off the voting rolls. But if particularly Democrats, if you can get a bunch of friends registered, we can take this thing over. Paul, thanks for the call. Mark in Las Vegas. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Hi, yes. Hold on, I'm taking off speakerphone.
Thank you, Mark.
There we go. Oh, sure, of course. It really occurs to me, and I called in, my topic is racism, but when you look at environment, racism, energy, every single problem that we face in the world, the real divide is between knowledge and ignorance. Your caller from Mississippi a while ago called in and proclaimed to be proud to be many things that are objectionable to civilized, educated people.
Yes.
So I really see this as just different facets of this fundamental issue. When you talk about race, what are we talking about? We're talking about evolutionary adaptation over time, simply for skin color and certain traits that were selected.
Yeah.
And so it's really silly. But I see it also, the rejection, the undermining of President Obama, a lot of it had to do with rejection of knowledge and the idea that any African American could be smarter than any white person. And this is just ignorance writ large again.
Yeah. I think that if we're talking at the level of the individual, you're making a really, really good point, Mark. But if you look at who lives downwind of the vast majority of the refineries in America, the vast majority of the coal-fired power plants in America, the vast majority of the industrial waste sites of America, who's inhaling the most poisoned air in the United States, almost without exception, it's communities of color. So at the institutional, structural, corporate, and even governmental level, because the government licenses and permits all these things, what you see is an absolute intersection between energy policy, racism, energy policy and racism, and whatever the third thing was that you mentioned.
Sure. Absolutely, I agree. And again, the shame of all of this is it's the rejection of human capital. There is a potential for a Neil deGrasse Tyson in every one of those communities. And what we're doing is we're throwing away knowledge, potential knowledge, and solutions when we throw these people away.
Yeah, I agree. There was one of the, might have even been the Oregon paper this morning. I read a bunch of newspapers, and it was a picture of a woman who had just graduated with her MD, right? And she's going to be a neurosurgeon, and she graduated at the top of her class, and she's an immigrant from either Ghana or Nigeria, I forget which, and a black woman. And, you just have to assume that down in Louisiana or Mississippi, you've got, white people going, how does that happen? I don't understand, or maybe in the Oval Office. It's just, it's the lost potential. You're absolutely right. And, when Italian families came to this country in the 1850s, what was the sign on so many places? No dogs are Italians, or no dogs are Irishmen. And then it was the Italians in the 1890s, it was the Irish in the 1860s.
I have one person to mention really quick that would be rejected under blanket policies.
Fast.
Elon Musk.
You're right.
To the Thom Hartmann program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of your calls here on Anything Goes Friday. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Grace in Detroit. Hey, Grace, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hi, Tom. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Back at you.
Every morning I read my MSN News on the computer.
Mm-hmm.
They ask for questions. They always have a poll. And I find this very disheartening. These are what the poll results are today. It's now 1:30 in Michigan. And the first question was, were you offended by Trump calling Haiti and African countries assholes? 49% say yes. 47% say no.
Right.
Next question, was it appropriate for the media to repeat Trump's remark? 54% yes, 42% no. That's not bad. Do you consider Trump's remark to be racist? 45% say yes, 53% say no.
Wow.
It's very disheartening.
Yeah. It really is, and that's why I opened the show saying there's all this Sturm and Drang and outrage and fainting on the couch and all that kind of stuff going on in the media, and I suspect that none of that is happening on Trump's base. I haven't watched Fox News in several weeks. I've lost access to it because we no longer have cable TV here. But
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. We're using Sling. I get CNN and MSNBC, but I don't get Fox. And so I don't know how they're handling it over there, although I do know, in the past, I would, when something terrible happened or something that reflected poorly on the president of the Republican Party happened, and I would turn to Fox, and I would either see the exact opposite spin on the story, or they'd be doing a segment on, how to feed your pets, or something like that. So I don't know how that's being handled, but yeah, good point. And speaking of polls, and thank you for that call, Grace. Speaking of polls, Nigel sends me our poll today from YouTube. I mentioned the question before as we were hitting the last hour, but here are the answers. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange granted citizenship by Ecuador. Good idea, ? 50% yes, he's a freedom fighter and needs support. 13% yes, now he can leave the Ecuadorian embassy in London. 16% no, several countries want to extradite him for alleged crimes. 19% no, this solves nothing. 3% WikiLeaks should be banned. Interesting. So, Mike, in Cassiopolis, Michigan, isn't it?
Cassiopolis, Tom. We do this every time.
Okay, my apologies, Mike. What's up?
Happy New Year. First of all, I wanted to reiterate, as you already know, profanity is the symptom of a feeble mind trying to be understood.
That's what my dad always used to say to me whenever I would swear.
Simply what it is, Tom.
Yeah.
Secondly, I wanted to say my local electric or power co-op, they're making solar panels available for $15 a month. I've got that much from their brochures.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah, thank you again for that. And I wanted to talk about what we have in this nation is a crisis of leadership, in that people want to lead, but they don't understand how we are derived as a people, who we are, why we are at this point. And simply because, for instance, we don't understand that Southerners particularly got there by way of the Scottish-Irish immigration down from the Northeast down through the Appalachian Valley, and with that they took a sense of honor. And if you just look at some of the bloodiest American feuds and the names like the Graham Tewksburys, the
Hatfields and the McCoys.
Hatfield McCoy, the Peacock, the Lee Peacock feud. They have a sense of honor, and even your callers earlier, we have to develop a lexicon that doesn't offend that sense of honor. To wit, we are all one, and our message can carry across the nation. I've been to places like Lakewood, Washington, Federal Way. down in Nashville. You get callers from South Carolina, Mississippi, Alabama, people who listen to you. And the problem is the leadership doesn't have a way to unite the nation in terms of how we are a nation of immigrants. And northern cities like New York and Chicago, since the Irish were marginalized, they created street gangs. And in Chicago, people who were moving west, they were going to go farther west, but they stopped in Chicago. But the Irish gangs, and then later Prohibition, the Italians, and now here we are looking at Chicago today in a milieu of the war on drugs and
right. It's just prohibition all over again, and the white.
And then we have infrastructure problem in Chicago of the water, lead pipes bringing water, and then the proliferation of guns. Yeah. So people who want to lead don't understand that infrastructure problems, a train falling on the I-5, closing it, there's hardly a way from Tacoma down to Portland. Yeah. Vehicles had to go around. That infrastructure problem can be translated to the failure of the Atlanta airport, water breaking in the New York airport. Our leaders, see, capitalism is exploitative. And women have said, look, time's up, enough's enough. They're the largest group being exploited in this country. So the system is going to have to go from a competitive environment to more democratic, like Dr. Richard Wolff says, democratization of the workplace.
Right.
But here, in the Army, we were always taught to shoot at the closest target. And the Republican representative, he's up for re-election. Our governor's up for re-election here in Michigan. We have a Dr. Matt Longjohn. He's running as a Democrat for Congress. So this idea of getting into the party, I hope good ideas can come from this local precinct level. I've gone down to the Democratic office, and it's only because of your argument. You know what I'm saying?
Thank you, Mike.
I'm going to try this to see if we can win. We need to get some wins. And like I say, they want to lead, but they don't understand what makes America. America's already great because we have people from around the world, from Southeast Asia to Europe to Africa. They bring, a richness and a diversity that other nations don't have.
Yeah.
And I really think the new level of leadership is going to have to show that,
Yep.
I talked to someone the other day. They didn't even know, Lake Michigan, only 10% of it's frozen. So we're getting all this lake effect snow. Today, Chicago's going to get it because the wind's from the northeast. Well, all the money we spend on that is based on how warm the water is.
Right.
And the meteorologists here, they try to sugarcoat why we're having the weather we're having. But I think we need leaders who can hammer these issues home, and we don't have to worry about CNN, MSNBC. Back in the 60s, there were hundreds of thousands of people. The Students for Democratic Society got a march together, and there was no internet. When I was in college, you had them, the Spartacus League, all these, young socialists, and they were getting the messages out.
Yeah.
And
Mike, you've covered a lot of territory.
Level of commitment and understanding.
Yeah, Mike, you've covered a lot of territory, and the one point that I think that you're missing, and I say this respectfully, you say we have a leadership crisis in this country, and I absolutely agree. I would say, though, that, and you identified a bunch of different problems that are consequences of that leadership crisis, and I absolutely agree. I think it was a brilliant analysis. The one thing that you missed is that the reason why we have this leadership crisis, and this is 100% true or 90% true in the Republican Party, and it's maybe 30% true in the Democratic Party. The reason we have this leadership crisis is because so much money is necessary to run for political office because the Supreme Court changed the rules of the political game to make it that way. And therefore, you've got billionaires and big corporations who are buying politicians, and they are not interested in buying leaders. They're interested in buying toadies. So you get people like Mike Pence, who in 2000 wrote an article about how tobacco doesn't cause cancer, and now is denying climate change. Back then it was on behalf of the tobacco industry. Now it's on behalf of Koch Industries and British Petroleum. You've got all these, literally the entire Republican Party willing to lie to all of us about real science just because of the contamination of politics by money. And that is the core cancer at the bottom of anything. And if we could get the money out, then we could see real statesmen and women rather than just hacks or rather than just toadies coming into these positions. Mike, thanks for the call. Very thought-provoking, very well said. I appreciate it. And let's see. Yeah, I got a minute left here. John in Grafton, Idaho. Hey, John, what's up?
Yeah, thanks for taking my call. I've been, well, two things. The first one was that this morning I learned that guys that are growing pot are using rat poison to get rid of
rats.
Some of the chemicals involved, so that they can keep their crops going, and they're ending up inadvertently killing owls. And
that may be true of the illegal pot operations. Most of the legal pot operations now are in greenhouses so that they can climate control everything and they can very, very carefully calibrate the yield. And I'm talking about things like THC and CBD and whatnot. So, yeah, when you're buying pot illegally or you're buying it on the black or gray market, you may have pesticides in it. You may have anything in it. God only knows. If you're buying your pot from a legal dispensary.
And the other thing that I suggest is, if the sugar industry were to take the high road and say that we're going to put sugar, take sugar out of the diet or all the people on the planet, and
John, I'm sorry, we're out of time.
Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
When you hear the music, you have 10 seconds to wrap it up. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Jesse, watching Free Speech TV in Sonoma County, California. Hey, Jesse, what's on your mind today?
Morning, Tom.
Hey.
Racism.
Okay.
I'd like to make 4 very short little statements here.
Okay.
And then I'll shut up. 1, the root cause of racism is sexism. 2, racial purity is impossible without controlling women. 3, the main difference between conservatives and liberals is conservatives consider women private property, liberals consider women public property. My last one, the battle of the sexes is not men versus women. It is men battling men over women who are merely the ball.
Wow. There's some penetrating insights there, Jesse. I can't disagree with that in broad principle. I mean, we could expand, I think, on some of those points.
Oh boy, could we?
Yeah. Yeah, but the idea that all racism comes out of sexism.
Think about it, please, Tom. Please consider it.
Yeah, can you explain that to me? I mean, if you've got a society that is totally homogenous, you know, if you're talking about some small town in Norway that's all white or some small town in Nigeria that's all black, and neither town likes people of another race, what does that have to do with sexism?
Because sexism is the root cause of racism.
Why? How?
Racial.
I get the whole thing about, you know, controlling women and not, you know, and that would produce things like biracial children. But I don't get that one, that predicating assumption. I don't understand it.
Sexism is a global phenomenon.
Sure.
Even if it's a homogenous society.
Racially homogenous. Yeah, it would have to be sexually homogenous to you know, but there's no such thing. We don't.
Sexual homogenous is not really
right. Doesn't exist.
Possible. You know, it's treating women like actual human beings.
Right.
Even in the most Norway, even in Iceland, we still have the disparity of income.
But Iceland, to use Iceland as the example, I've been there many times. Iceland is almost entirely white. They're not intolerant of people of color, but they make it very, very difficult for people of color, or frankly anybody else, to emigrate to their country. And I don't know that just because, and they have a history of matriarchy and matrilineal, and it's still a matrilineal society. You take the name of your mother, not your father. And in fact, you add the word daughter to it. But it doesn't mean that there's not racism there, at least from what I've experienced. I mean, not that I've experienced racism.
But there still remains sexism.
Oh, of course.
Remains.
Yeah. Yeah, but that doesn't...
And is the factor and all that shakes down from that.
So is what you're saying that once people begin to identify the other, even if the other is simply the other gender, they have programmed themselves or started down the road?
I have to... please don't conflate the words gender and sex. Gender being merely sex roles, an act, masculinity or femininity. That's an act. We are not born with those things.
Oh, I always thought...
Could we please use the word sex?
Yeah, I always use the word sex as a verb. Frankly, when people used to say, what's your sex, I'd say yes. But, okay, Jesse, thank you very much. Very thoughtful analysis. I appreciate it. We'll be right back. And, Luke Vargas is with us. Where is Luke? There's Luke on the board. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. Our report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Loving What You Do. Ellen Ratner's new book on the line with us. Luke Vargas with Talk Media News Service. Hey, Luke.
Hey, Tom. How are you?
Great to have you with us. So, I have your talking points here, but I'm just curious. You're in New York. I think you're often at the UN. Donald Trump made these wild remarks yesterday. I've been saying on this program, I think it's going to actually help him with his base. And I've had a number of people representing his base call in to go, yeah, we love Donald Trump. Yes, he said exactly what's true, blah, blah, blah. But, other people going, oh, my God. What's your sense of what's going on based on what you're hearing and the people you're talking to?
Well, here at the United Nations, we've been told that there is a group of African ambassadors that is getting together as we speak, UN ambassadors, and they are going to put out a joint statement later today condemning the president's comments. But I think I take to heart what you said about the fact that this might fire up Trump's base. Just looking on Twitter, we've seen the likes of Tommy Lahren and many other people articulating a sentiment I've heard many times on the campaign trail, which is this notion that if your country isn't an S-hole, then why would you be wanting to come here in the first place? So they believe that President Trump is hitting something, maybe his language is a little bit off, but he's hitting on a sentiment that they feel like that sort of helps explain to them the immigration trends that we've been seeing. But again, I as much as I think it'll be symbolic to get some of these UN ambassadors coming out and condemning President Trump today, I'm not really sure what that accomplishes in the larger sense.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, as is so often the case here. You noted that the White House has praised China for strictly enforcing sanctions on North Korea today. Is that real? I mean, and how is China... Hasn't China been repeatedly dragging its feet on sanctions?
They have been, and it's worth pointing out that this White House praise comes on the heels of a report from the Chinese government itself talking about their own compliance here. So this is not some sort of U.S. report on Chinese compliance, because when you do see those more formal U.S. or international reports on China's behavior, the numbers are a lot less rosy typically. But at least according to what the Chinese government reported on Friday, they decreased their amount of imports to North Korea in December by 81% compared to the previous month, and exports to North Korea by about a quarter. And that's a much more valuable portion. There's if you look at this, $54 million went from North Korea to China, things that the Chinese are purchasing from North Korea, but about $250 million of goods went into North Korea. And so, again, it's worth pointing out here that, A, we have to be a little bit distrustful of the data, or just naturally suspicious given its source, but also to acknowledge that in many of both the Russia-North Korea bilateral trade and China's trade with Russia, that a lot of what goes on is never measured and is basically a black market trade. And we don't really have any indications that some of those sort of black market trades have disappeared and that the crackdown is harsh enough. But at least if you're taking the government at their word and you look at the regulations that they have been imposing, they have made progress on paper. They've dramatically limited the amount of Chinese crude oil and other sorts of refined petroleum products that are going into North Korea. But again, it looks like an example of the Trump administration sort of taking the Chinese at their word. But we've seen the White House go back and forth over the past few months about really if it's going to keep calling out China for noncompliance or if they're going to praise them for supposedly doing what President Trump says. And if you pick a week, there's going to be a report that gives you enough justification to make either sort of determination. But at least for now, with the talks with South Korea seemingly successful, the White House is sort of saying that they did a good job and that China is towing the line here.
Interesting. Maybe Donald Trump wants to get a discount on his line of ties. Speaking of Trump, he's told the Wall Street Journal he's willing to extend the NAFTA negotiations. What's going on here with Trump? I thought he was going to blow up NAFTA.
Well, we're seeing a little bit of a change in his position, and let's just back up here. So these talks were supposed to end at the end of 2017. Obviously, that didn't happen. The talk had then been to extend them to March, but negotiators who are in the thick of this say basically no progress is being made on the core elements of disagreement. They're sort of settling various superficial matters, but keep punting the more contentious issues within these talks. And that we're getting to the point with the Mexican presidential elections scheduled for the 1st of July, that we're entering a campaign season where the current government in Mexico is going to lose most of its standing. They're already sort of viewed as lame duck. And many of the opposition parties that are challenging the ruling party in Mexico don't want any part of this deal. They either want to get rid of it altogether. That's sort of one side of the aisle. And the other one says, we have to be a lot more strong arguing for Mexican interests here. So we're not going to accept any sort of compromise. And I think the current government says basically our clock is ticking. And so President Trump, in an interview with the Wall Street Journal, said, look, I'm cognizant of the fact that he didn't use that word, of course, but he's aware that the deadline of the elections is going to cause things to get really slowed down. And he's going to hold off on any threat to pull the United States out of NAFTA until after July 1st. Let me also just say we've heard from sources in the administration that there is a new line being used to try and convince Trump about the risks of pulling out, that in the wake of the tax bill, people have sort of given up saying, what about American manufacturers? What about things like the corn trade and other things? And they're basically saying, if you get rid of the NAFTA agreement, the stock market is going to take a hit. And for some reason, that argument, though it's only just one small slice of the economic consequences of leaving NAFTA, is the one that may have started to persuade him to take a more moderate position here. So if that's true, it's a savvy play by the Chamber of Commerce and other Republicans in Congress who want to keep this deal. They have exhausted a long list of explanations, and this one maybe is working.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
With you live, it's Anything Goes Friday, and Joe in Cupertino, California. Hey, Joe, what's on your mind today?
Happy New Year, Tom. I think I was screened by your wife. It was a blessing. I don't know if that's who I was speaking to, but it was a surely different voice than I normally get.
Yeah, I'm not going to out Louise, but anyway. Yes.
Anyways, I wanted to talk about Korea, but I wanted to just mention that my heart goes out to my friends in Santa Barbara that are just suffering. It's amazing that.
Oh, the mudslides, yeah.
Yeah, and I haven't heard anything from the White House about it. I'm not sure if that's because Oprah's there or what, but it's just amazing. At any rate, your book club is just so informative, and you were reading from a book, and they were talking about the Iran-Contra issues back, and I don't remember the name of the book, but it got me to thinking about an interview that I happened to be privy to about 10, 15 years ago with a gentleman by the name of General Singlaub. And I did some research after listening to your book about you talk about this book here, and I guess I'm asking for maybe you're the history major here. MacArthur was called back from Korea by Truman, I believe. Is that right? It was Truman that said no, and then later on,
Truman fired him.
Yeah, he got fired. It was a big deal, and I remember
for insubordination.
Right, because
Well, I don't know what the exact reason was.
Yeah, that might not have been the technical term, but that was functionally what was going on. Truman thought he knew how better to prosecute the war than MacArthur thought he knew better how to prosecute the war than his president. His president wasn't having it.
Jimmy Carter was the president when General Singlab did the same thing. And Jimmy Carter pulled him back and said, listen, we could send our troops home if we just would negotiate this truce between his father, the current dictator in Korea, his father.
Yeah.
I think that we're using this of the month, whatever the thing of the day is, and it's very concerning. I mean, I think we were at the brink of nuclear war last week. Today, that's not so the problem because we're going to the Olympics now. Iran is again with the arms, and here we're discussing as they go again race. It's just distraction after distraction after distraction. Now, I don't know what the distraction is or what that's about.
I mean, what they're distracting us from? They're distracting us from the fact that they are robbing us blind with their tax policies. They are destroying the social safety net with the budget that's coming up, with its massive cuts for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. They are polluting our water. Scott Pruitt is running around undoing all kinds of EPA rules, polluting our air, poisoning our children, destroying our schools, selling off our public lands to extractive industries who are then taking some of that money and using it to line the pockets of the very same Ryan Zinke-type politicians who are doing this work as toadies for these industries. That's what they're distracting us from, Joe.
Well, and my fear is I don't know if we have the Democratic backbone to confront that. And I don't know if it's going to change in 2018 if we continue to reelect people that aren't willing to speak out. I give applause to Durbin for speaking up, but wait a minute, what are you doing in the room with the guy that's, not, there's 6 other Republicans in there. I guess we have to put somebody in the room.
Yeah.
But it just seems like you're taking a deal with the devil.
I think Trump forgot Durbin was in the room, frankly. but
I think you're describing an adult with ADHD if you look at what he does.
I think we're describing an adult with early onset dementia, if not Alzheimer's. Maybe not Alzheimer's, but Trump is. You look at tapes of Trump 20 years ago and you look at tapes of Trump right now, and there is such a big difference. And I think it's beyond a difference that's beyond the ones that are typically described by what's referred to as normal age-related cognitive loss. Instead, I think that we're looking at a full-on meltdown, whether it's the result of a lifetime of mental illness or whether it's, I just don't know. But whatever it is, it ain't a good thing. At all.
Before you let me go, if you were sending your presidential candidates, I want you to look at Markey. I think he's a smart man.
Ed Markey from Massachusetts?
No, I'm sorry, the gentleman from Oregon.
Oh, Jeff Markley. Markley. Yes, thank you. Very
articulate man. He's on point, and he does seem to have the ability to go after the guy. He's 61 years old.
Yeah, Jeff Markley's a good guy. He was his first run. I was doing my show from Portland when he first ran for the Senate. He's a very good guy. He has turned into one of our very best progressive senators. I'm with you. So, Joe, thanks for the call. Stan in Westminster, Maryland. Hey, Stan, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. 2018 starting off where 17 left off, isn't it?
It seems.
Two things, Tom. Mano y mano. I would just like to know what you think it would take to end the real problem in this country, and to me, that is corporate America. And two, also on a personal note, and going back to into your book club in reference to Felter's book when he talks about in one of his chapters about corporate America, specifically GM, General Motors. I have a personal stake in that because my dad was one of the 100 people that was killed as a result of corporate America.
Is that the side saddle gas tanks?
GM.
Yeah.
And that's as far as I can go with that because unfortunately I had to sign an affidavit and I'm not allowed to speak anymore on the subject.
Oh my.
I've done quite a bit of research and reading, so I've got to learn quite a bit about corporate America, and I am appalled at what they are allowed to do in this country and many other countries.
Yeah.
So with that said, your thoughts, Tom?
About what?
about what it would take to end this monopoly that corporate America.
I would say, and I think Stan, we need to keep reminding ourselves of this, that it's not the players in the game who are at fault. It is the people who are defining the rules. If the NFL tomorrow was to say, we're going to start allowing players to grab other players by the face mask and jerk their heads around. If they did that, there are a lot of players who would do it, right? It would become the new move that helps you win, helps your team win. You'd also have a whole bunch of people with broken necks because you changed the rules. So, when the Supreme Court in 1976 in the Buckley case said the First Amendment protects the right of a billionaire to own his own personal politician or even political party if he's rich enough and ambitious enough. When that was affirmed in 2010 with the Citizens United decision and expanded, and then in 2013 with the McCutcheon decision where they said, there used to be a statutory limit. You could only own 200 politicians, or maybe it was 212. Now the Supreme Court says you can own an unlimited number of politicians if you have an unlimited amount of money. That's changing the rules. That's like the NFL saying it's okay to pull on somebody's face guard. And so then we sit around and we go, oh, my God, these corporations are messing with our politics. They're polluting our water and air and getting away with it because they're electing politicians who are putting into office bureaucrats like Scott Pruitt, who don't give a damn about our air or our water. And who are we going to blame? Koch Industries? General Motors? No, you blame the Supreme Court for changing the rules of the game. It's the damn NFL, to use that metaphor, that analogy. So I don't think that the problem is corporate America. Corporate America was very well behaved from 1932 until 1980. Corporate America, actually, if you look at the statistics for the growth of wealth in the United States, the bottom three quintiles, a quintile is a fifth of the population. So economically, the poorest 20%, the next to the poorest 20%, the middle 20%, the bottom 60% of America saw the fastest wage growth in our country from 1935 until 1980. There was wage growth at the top 20% and the top 40%, but it wasn't as fast as the bottom 60%. Reagan changed the rules of the game. And ever since then, that bottom 60% has been absolutely flat, and the top 1% has seen, something like 900% growth in wages and wealth since Reagan came in. So it's the rules of the game, and we need to keep going back to that, Stan, because if we don't change that, then nothing can be changed. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Anything Goes Friday. Back with more of your calls right after this. And welcome back. Let's see here. Rich, watching us on Free Speech TV. Hey, Rich, what's on your mind today? In Greenwood, Indiana.
Much. I wanted to offer some language that we can empower ourselves with as the president exercises his jaw and says such ridiculous and grotesque things.
Okay.
I'm reminded again and again as instances as this occur of a statement that I saw on a T-shirt, and I think it's either by Zinn or Chomsky. If you're neutral in situations of injustice, you've chosen the side of the oppressor.
Right.
We stand up, and when we get offended with something that hurts our heart, we've got to speak up. Something from Goethe: none are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. And if they've done a mind job on you, if you're being quiet because you're going along to get along, like Ryan and McTurtle, shame on you. You've lost your soul, and you need to have it pointed out to you. And Roy Cohn raised up Trump with example and tutelage in a fashion that did nothing to offer the healing of the hole that Trump's father put in him.
Right, and let's remember, Roy Cohn was Joe McCarthy's right-hand man and, good buddies with Richard Nixon along with Roger Stone.
So important to link that to Nixon because as the historic example of bad behavior, I want everybody to just invest the time to rewatch All the President's Men and watch that last scene with Mark Felt in the basement with Woodward. And he says, "Get out your notebook. There's more." It's the whole thing.
Right.
Don't allow your recollections to fade. This is, we're talking about FISA these days as if it's the thing to drill down on, but that's only the tip of the iceberg as a concept that we can potentially get a finger grip into.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
clear your throat here for me, Tom, because if I try, I'll vomit.
I'm sorry. Say that again.
I say clear your throat for me here, please, because if I try, I'll vomit.
Okay. What? So your point, Rich, is what?
Let us not allow ourselves to be bystanders.
Right.
I would offer this as sort of a punchline about the Me Too and how people are just saying, well, shrug.
Yeah.
There's a tax season ad, TAX, from the tax preparer software that has the actress who played 7 of 9. I think her name is Jerry.
Yeah, Rich, we're running out of time here.
Well, she's standing, terrified.
I'm sorry, Rich. I'm out of time. But yeah, I agree. We're at a Kitty Genovese moment. I just said it. We're looking at a Kitty Genovese moment. Only a political version of it. Kitty Genovese was the woman in New York City who was murdered back in the 60s, as I recall. In the, I'm not sure if it was the plain view, but it was certainly within the hearing of many dozens of people. A fellow stabbed her to death, if my recollection serves me right. And nobody did anything. Nobody said anything. It caused at least a year-long period of massive navel-gazing on the part of Americans, of introspection, of trying to understand how could this have happened in our country, in our city. And I think that we have an analogous moment right now with the resident of the White House. So, we'll see how it shakes out. Daniel in Dadeville, Alabama. Hey, Daniel, what's on your mind today?
Hey, give me a second. Let me take you off speaker.
Sure.
Okay, is that better?
That's much better. Hey, what's up, Daniel?
Yeah. Hey, I just wanted to tell all your viewers, if we can do this in the red state of Alabama, it can be done nationwide. We started out with 3 people, and we are now have over 50 progressive Democrats, and we are filing paperwork.
You're talking about who are going to run for political office?
Pardon me?
You said you started with 3 and you now have 50, but you didn't. Do you mean in your group, in your party, running for office? I don't understand.
Yeah, no, we're not running for. We are supporting the Democrats.
Oh, okay. So you're building a political action group, as it were.
Yes, the Southern Political Advocacy Committee.
That's great. Good on you, Daniel.
Yeah, we started off with 3. We went to the Democrat. And come to find out, our county Democrats were coming to us for get Doug Jones signs.
That's great. That's great.
So we said, what the heck? We might as well do this on our own. And so we just kept building and building and building, and now we are incorporating. We got a charter and file with the IRS. It takes a lot of work, but it can be done. If it can be done in a red state like Alabama, it can be done nationwide.
Amen. Amen. And we're seeing that. I mean, I think what's happened is that Donald Trump has taken. I mean, he never wore the mask, really. I mean, he had a lot of BS on the campaign trail, a lot of promises that he knew people would love, and he had no intention of keeping, obviously. But the larger issue is that Donald Trump has pulled the mask off the Republican Party. He has said out loud what the Republicans have been saying in code for 35 years. That they are the party of racism, they are the party of oppression. That they're a party that's willing to use religious and racial and gender bigotry in order to for political purposes. And the Republicans have always denied this. Oh, it was just a coincidence that Reagan's first speech was at the Nebosha, or however you say it, county fair, in Philadelphia, Mississippi. Yeah, it was just a coincidence that, Nixon had his Southern strategy. No, it wasn't a coincidence. This is the party, and now people are realizing it all across the country, and I think that that's a good thing. Thank you, Daniel, for the call. In response to some of our earlier calls, there was a caller, I think in the first block anyway, maybe the second segment of our first hour, who was, gloating, basically saying, yeah, my man Trump, he's telling the truth, blah-de-blah-de-blah. Nate shared with me a great quote from Stokely Carmichael that I think, a member of my generation, or was, a fellow who I think really, really nails it. He says, if a white man wants to lynch me, that's his problem. But if he's got the power to lynch me, that's my problem. Racism is not a question of attitude. And this is why it's so important that we realize that the President of the United States is leading the alt-right movement. Racism, Stokely Carmichael said, is not a question of attitude. It's a question of power. Racism gets its power from capitalism. Thus, if you're anti-racist, whether you know it or not, you must be anti-capitalist. The power for racism, the power for sexism comes from capitalism, not an attitude. And to that extent, I would say that what's going on, what we're seeing right now, and I wouldn't fully agree that all capitalism is totally destructive. I'm an advocate for highly regulated capitalism. But to the extent that Donald Trump is being supported by billionaires and the companies that make him wealthy, to the extent that you've got companies going, oh, yeah, we're going to give our workers a raise for our tax cut, and because of that wonderful guy in the White House. And then, they throw a few pennies to them. They do the John Rockefeller shiny dime thing, and then lay a bunch of them off like Walmart did. To the extent that that's happening, yeah, capitalism is hand in glove with racism in that regard. But the main thing is that it's a power equation, and that's the thing to remember. Jim in Los Angeles. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind?
Happy Friday, Professor.
Thank you. Back at you, Jim.
The only reason I still call you the smartest man in media is because I don't have my own show.
Okay.
But KPFK is in trouble, and Blaise Pompain is the wisest man in media, and he takes on peace on earth and the Israeli war crimes. But what's most important right now, Tom, is this election, 2018. We must win back the House and the Senate.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Jim. And that means get everybody you know registered to vote and make sure that they show up. Jim, thank you for the call. Well said. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back with more of your calls on Anything Goes Friday right after this. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, I think. Are we back, Nate? Now we're back. There we go. Welcome back. Scott in Alameda, California. Hey, Scott, what's on your mind today?
Tom, so I'm calling about the immigration meeting yesterday with the incredibly awful depravity that was displayed by Trump and the language used. Caller earlier talked about the Scotch-Irish tradition in the South and appealing to honor, and we need to come up with new language. Here's the problem that we're facing, and it's very critical. And I hope that people follow along with me here. Okay, so Trump is negating language. Okay, he's making a zero. He's trying to start a new ledger with language. Okay. Zero was invented by the Sumerians 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, which were brown people, okay? And the zero is a placeholder. It negates what came before and begins a new ledger. A heretical stance to priesthoods. Understand? When you make a zero, you're cutting off what came before and you're starting something new. Okay? It's very important to understand that.
Okay.
Grill Marcus, in his great book Lipstick Traces, tracks this negation through history, and it's usually by heretics who are either mad or have a political, interest, whatever. What they try to do is they try to cut off what came before, and they create something new. It's a negation, right? This is a blacking out. It's a denying of history, creating new history, whatever you want to call it. All right. So this is what's really happening with him. And these heretics throughout history have caused social upheaval, revolutions. Cut to World War I with the loss of an entire generation of young people and the social upheaval that caused and the dislocation. And it really came out in art movements. I'm a commercial artist, so I study art history, so I really pay attention to this stuff. Duchamp's Fountain, I don't know if people recall this, but it was an art piece that was placed in a museum, in a exhibition. It's a urinal, okay? And it killed the French Academy. In 1917, okay, and the French Academy was very powerful in swaying public opinion, David and others, nationalism, and, the French Academy was used to sway public opinion, political public opinion, pro-war.
What's your point, Scott?
Oligarchs. But my point is the level of negation in his language, in denying that black and brown people have any value at all, is an incredible danger. It's Dada. This is Dada. If you're familiar with the Dada movement.
As in Dadaism.
Dada.
Yeah.
Dadaism. He's Dada. This is Dada. It's a negation of everything that came before. We are at zero.
Kind of mix that with nihilism, if I'm saying the word right.
Nihilism, yes.
Nihilism,
we are at
thank you.
Year zero. This is year zero. I've been calling senators all morning to get them to get on the Senate floor and immediately censure the president for this. We are at year zero. The incredible danger that we are at now because of negation.
Yeah. Here's the thing, though, Scott. I'm not sure that the Senate has the ability to censure the president. I remember when, I want to say it was Cynthia McKinney. It was a member of Congress from, as I recall, Georgia. Sean, you were working with us at the time. This was like a decade ago. I wrote an op-ed about how Dick Cheney was a war criminal. She read it on the floor of the House of Representatives, and they literally dragged her off the floor and expelled her from the chamber for reading something that was against the vice president because of, quote, separation of power. The only way that Congress can go after the president would be through impeachment. Now, I may be wrong about that. I'm basing it on an anecdote from my own life, but
they can't censure him?
I'm not sure. I think that the Senate and the House only have the ability to censure their own members.
I've been calling Republicans all morning. Susan Collins, Angus King, he's independent. I think he's independent. Anyway, I've been calling.
They have the power of impeachment. And the cabinet and the vice president have the power of removal through the 25th Amendment. But the members of Congress have the power of impeachment, which is why Tom Steyer is pushing that so hard. I mean, why not just go for the end game? But although then you end up with Mike Pence, but increasingly it's looking like even the most radical right wing, Pence might be better than an erratic, unstable, racist, xenophobic bigot.
Yeah, my point of calling is how crucial this moment is. This is so outrageous, and so bad that this is negation. And again, I go back to this concept of zero. It's a beginning. It's a ledger.
No, I get it. You're getting redundant here, Scott. I absolutely understand, and I don't disagree at all with what you're saying. The question is then, what do we do about it? And if you're going to call your members of Congress and you don't want to call for the 25th Amendment or impeachment, at the very least, just say this is it. This is, a bridge too far, particularly if you're calling a Republican.
That's what I've been doing.
Yeah, this is a bridge too far, and you guys have lost me.
Way out there. Out there.
Yeah, there you go. Scott, excellent. Thank you for the call. Norma in Montgomery, Alabama. Hey, Norma, what's on your mind today?
Well, this ties in with what the guy was just saying. I've been thinking about Tom Cotton supporting Trump and denying that he said these racist remarks. And then I got to thinking about Tom Cotton's history, and that led back to me thinking of the Caucus Room restaurant conspiracy and whether or not he was there. I can't find my list of people who attended.
Pretty sure he was not. In fact, I think he was not even in the Senate at that time.
Well, I could not remember. But when you think about those people and their plan to oppose Obama and whether or not they have hung together, and this is what we're actually fighting, is this continuation of we had a black president, and they're holding on to Trump for whatever reason. I don't think he's going to pass his medical, and what will they do next week?
Oh, he's going to pass his medical, Norma.
I don't think so.
It's not a pass-fail thing. I mean, what they're going to do is they're going to say, okay, you've got high blood pressure, you've got high triglycerides, we think you should be on statins, blah-de-blah-de-blah, and maybe he already is because he is obese. But, and then he gets to choose which of that information from that medical exam is released to the public. And he might choose not to release any of it, or he might choose to release 5% of it. But there's no pass-fail here, and there's no way that he's going to get kicked out of office because of his physical health unless it's so bad that the vice president is willing to go to the cabinet and get signatures to initiate a 25th Amendment proceeding, which I think is extremely unlikely based on a doctor's report.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking about the budget, and they have to have it by the 19th. And that always makes me think about Martin Luther King Day. And earlier you had a guy talking about infrastructure racism.
Yeah.
And it's the 50th anniversary coming up of Martin Luther King's murder. And we had infrastructure here, which was going, that's going to be part of the budget. Will we get infrastructure or not? And I have always felt like when it came to infrastructural racism, that's why they ended 85 here in Montgomery instead of running across the Black Belt as a method of punishing the civil rights movement.
Right. Well, it could have been that, or it could have been the whole NIMBY thing. I mean, when I lived in Atlanta, the folks in Buckhead, the fanciest neighborhood in town, refused to let MARTA, the public transit system, come into Buckhead because they didn't want, quote, those people to have access to, quote, our neighborhoods. And the same thing in Washington, D.C. When I lived in D.C. I mean, it didn't happen when I lived in D.C. In Atlanta, it happened when I lived there. But when I was in D.C., I discovered that you can't take public transportation into Georgetown, which is a major part of D.C. And why? Because, the extremely wealthy Brahmins of Georgetown didn't want the riffraff coming into their neighborhood, at least with any ease. And so now, Georgetown is a continuous nightmarish traffic jam and kind of a weird little insular community. But yes, that's based in racism and in fear, but it's not like that kind of punishment that you were talking about.
Well, I don't know, but I would like to see Mississippi and Alabama get together and demand part of the infrastructure money, because there was $500 million sitting there in an account all these years, 50 years waiting on the extension, and it's never happened. Huh. How much interest has it earned? There ought to be enough money to do something.
Yeah, I agree. Very well said. Norma, thank you for the call. Debbie in Minneapolis. Hey, Debbie, what's up?
Yes, hi, Tom. I'm kind of nervous, so I've written down what I want to say.
Okay. We have a minute for you to say it.
I'm a Bernie supporter. I think we'd be remiss not to take this opportunity of Trump's crap hole comment to say, yes, a lot of our fellow human beings are suffering horrible conditions. And why is that? Tie in the neoliberal policies, the NAFTA, the international corporations that created those crap holes. But if we focus on racism, we miss the opportunity to peel off Trump voters who don't want to be racist, but are hurting financially and need to know the reasons behind it, that you are the best. at enumerating, it's tempting to reiterate the baskets of deplorables comment from Hillary, but that just makes them dig their heels in and confirm their stereotype of us liberals that we don't speak to their concerns, but just call them names. We can harumph all we want, but how are we going to win over voters?
Yeah, that's a really, really important comment and point, Debbie. And that's why the Democratic Party needs a clear strategy and 3 solid goals, like health care for all, free college education, and get money out of politics, for example, or break up big monopolies. Debbie, thank you for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stick around. And welcome back. Let's see here who's watching on Free Speech TV. That would be Paula in Gig Harbor, Washington, watching Free Speech on a Roku box. Hey, Paula, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Nice to talk to you. First time, long time.
Thank you. Nice to talk to you too, Paula.
And so glad you're back on the West Coast. I can't tell you.
Me too.
I feel a lot better for you.
Thank you. It's nice to be with my kids too and my mother-in-law.
Exactly. Now's your time.
Yep.
You know, the world's really sick, Tom, and I think Trump is just our manifestation of that sickness. That's not why I called.
I don't disagree. I mean, you look at all the countries that have flipped authoritarian in the last 10, 15 years, and I would say neoliberalism has a lot to do with it. You know, from Turkey to Myanmar. Well, Myanmar always was. Thailand is going through severe changes. Look at what happened in the Philippines and India. You got Modi and Pakistan. I mean, just country after country that had a brief democratic moment, and now they're autocracies, essentially. It should be a real warning for all of us. But forgive me for interrupting you, Paula.
Well, for sure. You know, what we've spread around the world is now coming back to roost. And
yep.
I hope we enjoy it. What I was calling about was, did you not mention some time ago Congress really has the final control over the Supreme Court? I mean, they can rein them in.
Yes. In fact, let me read to you from Article 3, Section 2, just to be absolutely clear and explicit, particularly for those people who don't know what you and I are talking about right now. Article 3 defines the judiciary of the United States, the judicial branch. And Article 3, Section 2 says the Supreme Court shall have appellate jurisdiction. In other words, it's the final court of appeals, both as to law and fact, with such exceptions. And in fact, they capitalized the word exceptions, which back in the 1700s, you capitalized a word when you wanted to say this has a particular importance. With such exceptions and capital, and under such regulations, and they capitalized the word regulations, as the Congress shall make. So yes, the Congress can regulate the Supreme Court, and they have. The last time it was seriously done, it's called court stripping, by the way. If you talk to a lawyer about it, you say it's court stripping, they'll know exactly what you're talking about. Tom Daschle, when he was the Senate Majority Leader, pushed through a farm bill that had some arguably controversial pieces to it, and it had a paragraph in it that specifically said the Supreme Court may not rule on this.
Yeah. So is not Congress our last...
Congress could do it. Congress could pass a law essentially overturning Citizens United and overturning Buckley, and they could add to that law that the Supreme Court may not adjudicate this. It would probably create a constitutional crisis. You would have then a debate between the Supreme Court and Congress about who actually has that power. And, the Supreme Court would have their say and Congress would have their say, and God only knows how it would shake out. But and maybe that's why Congress is unwilling to do it. But Congress has that power. It's right there in the Constitution.
Well, so if, looks like it might be a Democratic win, this election.
Yep.
We'll start kind of floating that idea, putting the bug in people's ears. Let's get going on this.
Yeah, it would take 60 members of the Senate. We're back to my friend Richard Green's 279. It would take, 118 member or 38 member, whatever the number is. A number of people, there are 218 in the House, 60 in the Senate. That's right. 218 in the House, 60 in the Senate, and then one person in the White House. So if we had a majority in the House, if we had a supermajority in the Senate, and we had a Democratic president, I think it's entirely possible that we could do some court stripping, and it would be a fine thing. Paula, thank you. Thanks for raising a really important issue. We'll be right back. It's Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann program. Stick around. Welcome back. Kurt in Akron, Ohio. Hey, Kurt, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hi. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
It's bitter cold and icy and snowy here today in Northeast Ohio.
Oh, my.
But, we have a 12-hour ice and snowstorm.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, the reason I'm calling is I was reading Joe Biden's book, Promise Me, Dad, and he has a quote from his Uncle Ed, and it kind of makes me think of Donald Trump. And it goes, it's hard to hold account. It's hard to how did he say it? It's hard to hold accountable a horse's ass or something like that.
Yeah.
So
it does certainly remind you of somebody, doesn't it?
Yeah, the president's not well.
Yeah.
He's obviously not well.
Yes.
And my biggest pet peeve today is there are so many people out there today in this country who are not benefiting from anything that Donald Trump and the Republican Party are doing to them because they won't do anything for them but do things to them, as Harry Truman said in his 1948 Democratic acceptance speech, who are gleefully laughing, nodding their heads, and clapping, yay, Donald Trump, for saying this, because they don't know any different. They don't know any better. And they don't realize that by Donald Trump saying these things to the world about Africa and Haiti, that they're really hurting themselves. And, you know, if you think about it, Bill Clinton tried to save Haiti. Remember when he sent Jimmy Carter down there back in 94?
Yeah.
And by the way, speaking of Bill Clinton, I remember during the Lewinsky scandal, the Congress debated on censuring Clinton rather than doing an impeachment, which someone explained to me it's the equivalent of slapping someone on the wrist for doing something wrong. So
it is possible to censure a president. Thank you for that.
Yeah. So that was basically my comment, and I listen to your show all the time. I don't get a chance to call in because I'm usually working, but I do listen to you as much as I can. If not live, I do listen to the pre-record in the middle of the night.
Great. Well, Kurt, thank you very much, and thanks for your comments. They're well said. And in fact, let me respond to them, if I may, with some information from Nick Kristoff's op-ed yesterday in the New York Times, which is still up on the New York Times website. It's titled "Trump's Threat to Democracy." And he's quoting two political scientists, Stephen Levitsky and Daniel Ziblatt, who are professors at Harvard, and they wrote a book called How Democracies Die. And this was before, it's not before Trump. It's going to be released next week. They write in their book that there are four characteristics of an authoritarian, a dangerous authoritarian leader who will destroy a democracy. And they are, number one, a weak commitment to democratic rules. And we're certainly seeing that with Trump. Number two, they deny the legitimacy of their opponents. Witness Trump saying that Obama was not a legitimate president. Number three, they tolerate violence, Trump encouraging it in his rallies and certainly telling the police to be more violent. And number four, willingness to curb civil liberties or to curb the media. All four of those are Donald Trump. And according to this book and these two professors, Richard Nixon had one of those things, only one of those things, which was a weak commitment to democratic rules. And he was the only person in the entire 20th century who ran for president or was president who exhibited any of those four. And Donald Trump has all four of those, which means we need to take this stuff really, really seriously. Richard in Los Angeles. Hey, Richard, thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's up?
Hey, Tom.
Hey, Richard.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. Back at you.
The other day, Tom.
Pardon?
Was a couple days ago. I read an article that the UA was going to criminally prosecute Apple for purposely slowing down the older iPhones.
The UA? You mean the EU?
I'm sorry, the EU. I'm sorry,
okay.
Tom. So why doesn't that happen here?
Well, it doesn't happen here because our politicians are captive to, Apple, I think, is the wealthiest corporation in the world. If not it's, in the top two or three. Maybe Amazon has surpassed them now. Jeff Bezos certainly has made a fortune, but I would say that that's what's going on. And the slowing down of the iPhones. I experienced that myself. In fact, we talked about it on the air a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago or two ago. But yeah, and the Europeans are also going after Google for monopolies, and they're going after, and it's not just the big tech companies. I mean, the Europeans actually believe in competition. They believe in regulated capitalism, and clearly Republicans don't. Republicans believe in crony capitalism. Richard, excellent point. Thanks for the call. Bill in Clifton, New Jersey. Hey, Bill, what's up?
Yeah, hi. If I could just make one or 2 points first. The person who maligned the Dada is wrong. The Dada is where a group of artists who at the end of World War I were horrified what they saw, and they made a manifesto, and they pledged to no longer make art for the rich, no more monuments for patrons. And that's when you had all different types of styles coming out of that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that, Bill, because I remember Dadaism from like high school, or college. But I mean, that was so long ago. I didn't remember any of the details. Thanks for setting that straight. So, but anyhow, you called about Trump and dementia?
Right. Well, my mother has, hello?
Yeah, you're on the air.
My mother has a form which is frontal temporal, which only affects the behavior.
Right.
Not cognitive, not motor skills or anything. But if she goes off her meds, she starts getting, conspiratorial and...
Yeah, it's called the Phineas Gage syndrome.
What's that?
It's called the Phineas Gage syndrome. He was that railroad worker who had the spike driven through his brain and it took out his frontal lobes. And his behavior just got weirder and weirder. You think that that's Trump?
Right. Yeah. One other thing. On the Supreme Court, if we took over it, we could add 2 more liberal justices.
You're absolutely right. And Franklin Roosevelt damn near did that in 1937. And frankly, I wish he had. I think he could have, actually. There have been several very good books written on that. Thank you all so much for being with us today. We're having an extraordinary moment in the history of our country and our world. We need to be paying attention, but more importantly, we need to be active. You need to make sure that you're registered to vote. You need to make sure that your friends are registered to vote. You need to get out there and find a group to participate with and make change happen. Because democracy is not a spectator sport. Get out there, get active, tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Prophet's Way, A Guide to Living in the Now, which is largely my autobiography, essentially, a spiritual autobiography. This is from page 68, the chapter Changing the World by Changing Ourselves. The summer I lived in a teepee, I thought a great deal about the monastic experience. I'd read Dark Night of the Soul by St. John of the Cross and several books by Thomas Merton. And throughout my life had been drawn to the idea of solitude as a way of speeding up spiritual experience and growth. And that had certainly been my experience in my semi-monastic summer. I received knowledge and insights that I doubt I could have gotten any other way. Before I went into the forest and lived in that teepee, I'd always considered the monastic experience to be both intensely personal and intensely selfish. A monk, I thought, was a person working on himself and only affecting him or herself. But that summer, I realized that my spiritual practice was having an effect on the world. I could feel it. It was as if the world itself had a particular vibration made up of the buzz of all the life upon and within it. And when I was peaceful, it made the world a bit more peaceful. When I was agitated, the world became more agitated. My conclusion from this admittedly subjective experience was that I really was affecting the world, that monks are spiritual warriors and that monasteries are places from which powerful beams of positive spiritual energy fan out from the men and women in them to transform and help the world. While not so common among the writings of contemporary monks, this view is clearly held by those people who chose the monastic life in the centuries and millennia preceding the last 100 years or so. And so I worked at making myself more pure so I could add purity to the world. But throughout this, there was also part of me that thought that this was a subjective experience, perhaps with no objective reality. It seemed on that level that it wasn't possible that I could be so closely connected to the world, that I could have any significant impact on it just by my state of being at any particular moment or throughout my life. Because it was me experiencing the world, then, of course, the world would change as I changed. My point of view is shifting or being contaminated by my own mental state at the moment. This assumption was the result of my training in science. Science is something unique to those cultures who were influenced by the Greeks or the Persians. In India, Chinese, and Native American cultures, there is no equivalent. They have philosophy and spirituality, which integrate what we call science with what we call mysticism. But in their classic traditions, they don't have what we would refer to as pure science. Two of the primary tenets of science are the things that things are ultimately divisible into tiny, definable building blocks, and then for there to be a true reality, the observer must be separate from the observed. In our dreams, we're both observer and observed. It's unreal. In daily life, we're the observer, and the things around us, separate from us, are the observed. So we think of them as real. In this worldview, the entire universe can be separated into pieces, the first and primary division being that of observer and observed, subjective and objective. Science believed, and Aristotle and Descartes and others taught, that if the subjective observer could rid himself of his personal and instrumentational subjectivity and identify all the relevant factors, then a truly objective truth about the world and reality could be seen, measured, and determined. This belief, accepted as an absolute truth and the underpinning of our modern culture, led to viewing humankind as separate from the natural world. The classic question, if a tree falls in the forest and there's nobody there to hear it as a sound made, assumes that nobody there to hear it means a human. Only humans, so the story went, were capable of classifying and separating things, breaking them into pieces, as Aristotle taught us, and understanding their separate meanings. Only humans would recognize sound as sound. But as science divided matter into smaller and smaller pieces, a disturbing trend began to emerge. It was found that supposedly inanimate matter seemed to be affected by the act of observing. The first response to this was Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which stated that things were constantly in a state of flux. And so if anything were observed at any moment, by the time the observation itself was made, things had already changed. Therefore, it was impossible to ever truly and absolutely observe anything. Because by the time we'd registered the observation, by the time the photons of light had hit the retina of our eye, the thing we were observing had already changed. It was also noted that the act of observing was not purely passive. With an electron microscope, for example, electrons are bounced off of or passed through things to produce an image for viewing. Similarly, a conventional microscope only works when photons of light bounce off the specimen and into your eye. Light and electrons are bits of matter or energy that could have a demonstrable effect on the things being observed, further increasing the certainty of the accuracy of the observation. Heisenberg went so far as to say that the exact location of anything in time and space could never be known, regardless of method or instrumentation. So it seemed we really couldn't know anything as an absolute and real state. All we could do is engineering, working with things because they work, like electricity, even though we don't know how or why they work, which is in fact the case with electricity. This allows us to manipulate the world around us, to build machines and make things work, but it also leads to the dangerous assumption that to be able to use something is to know it. This is mirrored in human nature, too. We're constantly affected by our experience of life, and our experiences change our personality, our worldview, and our behaviors. And I'm not now the person I was before I met Herr Mueller, nor am I now the same person I was even a week ago or even 1 minute ago. We grow, change, and are constantly in a state of flux, and this provides us with an opportunity to develop the spiritual sides of ourselves, and by doing this, to make the entire planet more spiritual. So this aspect of the scientific approach turned out to be wrong. It was in fact not possible to separate the observer from the observed. The book is The Prophet's Way.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. Well, we have our blank hole. Oh, boy. I was, our blank hole president here talking about blank hole countries. This is so tragic. It's like we have gone from farce to tragedy. I was absolutely astonished yesterday when the television media, CNN, MSNBC, they were avoiding the word that Trump apparently, according to Dick Durbin, repeatedly used yesterday in the Oval Office or in the White House. They were avoiding the word by saying blank hole and stuff like this. And then the Washington Post put it in a headline on the front page. And then within 15 minutes, at least MSNBC, I didn't check CNN, was actually just saying it on the air. I mean, you know, Joy Reid opening a show last night with that, and before her, Chris Matthews. I just want to say to all of my listeners for today's program, particularly since today is Anything Goes Friday, CNN and MSNBC are not over-the-air stations. They are on cable television. Cable television is only very lightly regulated by the Federal Communications Commission. I'm on over-the-air stations. We're on AM and FM stations all over the United States and in several other countries. And those are regulated by the FCC, and there still are George Carlin's 7, it's probably more than that, but there still are obscenity rules. So I'm not going to use the word on the air. And I ask you, when you call in, please do not use the word on the air. If you do, number one, we will blank it out. Nobody will hear it because there's an obscenity filter that we've got. There's a time delay that we can just dump things. And so, it'll be a wasted effort. And number two, I will X you out of our database and you'll never be able to call the program again, which is what happens when anybody drops an obscenity on the air on this program. So, it's unusual that I have to start a program with a caveat and a request like that. But it's also unusual, to say the very least, that a president of the United States would refer to predominantly black or Hispanic countries with an obscenity that is just, it is so vile. So there's that. The thing that I thought interesting last night as I was watching TV when all this stuff was breaking was that there seemed to be, at least on MSNBC and CNN, I don't get Fox any longer because we've moved to nothing but online television, Sling, and I don't think they carry Fox, or if they do, I haven't found it, and I haven't been particularly looking for it. So I'm not sure how they handled it. But MSNBC and CNN both were operating out of the, for lack of a better word, assumption, or at least their programming and their hosts seemed to be operating out of the assumption that everybody in the country and the world was horrified that Donald Trump would use this word for excrement and the place that it comes from in the human anatomy. Or maybe the utensil into which it is dropped. I don't know. I don't know the etiology of that word. But, so many people were assuming that everybody was going to be horrified. I beg to differ. Remember back when Hillary Clinton talked about the basket of deplorables supporting Donald Trump? Of the 20, I think it's 23% of Americans who are registered as Republicans. And then you've got another probably 20% of independents who are hardcore Trump voters, or Trump lovers, or trumpets, or Trumpistas, or Trumpettes, or whatever they call themselves. I'm of the opinion that the president's comment yesterday is actually going to strengthen his base and increase his popularity with them. Because he just basically came out and said out loud the line that the people and organizations associated with people like Sebastian Gorka and Stephen Miller and Steve Bannon say in code. And frankly, what Ronald Reagan said in code when his first public speech after he was nominated to be president of the United States, and he was campaigning for that in 1980, his first public speech after the RNC convention was at the Nebosha, however you say it, near Philadelphia, Mississippi, the county fair there. Right down the street from where Schwimmer and Cheney and Goodman, the three civil rights activists, were murdered in 1960, what was it, 8? I think 7, I forget what year. It might have even been earlier than that, but it was. I remember when it happened. It was a big deal in Mississippi. They made a movie about it, Mississippi Burning. And Reagan's speech was all about states' rights. Donald Trump Jr. reprised that. It was 1964. Thank you, Sean. The first speech that, to the best of my knowledge, that Donald Donald Trump Jr. gave, the first major speech, was also at that county fair near Philadelphia, Mississippi. And he was also talking about things like states' rights. These guys have been saying this in code. Richard Nixon did his Southern Strategy. Ronald Reagan did. George Herbert Walker Bush, a little more moderated. He's, a little more of a high-class guy. He personally, former director of the CIA, I've got some problems with George Herbert Walker Bush, but nonetheless, and his stupid war in Iraq, which was done for purely electoral reasons to get himself reelected. It didn't work. As his son pointed out, he didn't let it last long enough. His war in Kuwait, actually, technically. But he followed the Iraqi soldiers back and killed them as they fled. But he was a little more moderate. But basically, every Republican since Richard Nixon has run on a campaign of keeping down black people, suppressing the black vote, vilifying black people, trying to characterize all recipients in the United States of welfare as black people. Actually, most recipients of welfare are white people in this country. Of course, white people are numerically larger, but nonetheless. But what Donald Trump said yesterday, in speaking of countries that are majority black or largely black or majority Hispanic, what Donald Trump, it's just a variation of what he said about Mexican rapists. He just said out loud what these guys have been saying in code for 36 years. And I suppose to that extent, to the extent that Donald Trump is finally being honest about who he is and who his supporters are, and who all of his Republican enablers in the House and Senate, if they have not denounced this, who they are, we should thank him for just putting it out in the open. Because we've been doing this absurd two-step since the 80s, really since the early 70s with Richard Nixon's war on drugs and all this kind of stuff. But then Reagan really amped it up with this whole welfare queen thing. These guys have been saying, oh, those black people, they're troublesome, they're inferior, they're not as smart, they're bad, blah, blah, and Trump just comes out and says it in a quite obscene way. Hillary Clinton was right. The people who support this man are deplorables. And I would add, clearly, anybody who has not now, as a consequence of what was just said, denounced, turned their back on, and walked away from Donald Trump, has just basically announced to the world that they're a racist. So anyhow, it's Anything Goes Friday. Your thoughts on this? I want to talk about Guantanamo. Nate was at a great little event here last night in Portland. We've got all kinds of stuff to talk about today. We'll get to it as we continue through the program. We'll be picking up your calls as well. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with your calls and more of the news of the day right after this. And welcome back. Let's see here. Moss in Tucson, Arizona. Hey, Moss, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Let me set this up a little bit. I'm a year older than you, but we've had very similar lifespan experiences, so I'm enjoy listening to you. Right now, I'm coming from two places. I'm a lay practitioner in the Zen tradition, sort of Zen tradition, and I'm also a paleo ecologist.
Okay.
And so I'm very concerned about the whole planet as opposed to focusing on the United States. But I'm concerned about figuring out a way to remove or contain the actions of this president because we're running out of time. The planet is running out of time. And you don't have to worry about me using any
obscenities on the air. Thank you, Moss.
Yeah, because I'm a Buddhist monk. Okay.
Okay.
I can't use those words.
I didn't know Buddhist monks couldn't swear. I used to meditate in Atlanta at the Atlanta Soto Zen Center every Sunday for years. But you're right. I never heard obscenity. Anyhow, you were saying.
So anyway, my first And the other thing I wanted to say is this draining the swamp in D.C., and I'm so glad you're out of D.C. because it's a tidal basin.
Yeah.
It's connected to the ocean. You can't drain that. Okay.
Well, they filled it in
Sorry.
with landfill. But anyhow, you wanted to talk about Trump and hate speech and what can be done. What are your solutions here?
Well, because I'm coming from a nonviolent tradition, so I think he should be shunned.
That's what I'm calling for. I'm saying any Republican who has not walked away from Donald Trump, turned their back on Donald Trump, or openly denounced Donald Trump is this. This is them now.
But I'm saying
they own it
collectively. I'm not focusing just on Republicans. I think Democrats should shun him.
Oh yeah.
I think. So I was going to ask you a question. For the Congress to operate, does it have to have a quorum? And what is that quorum? And if people stop showing up?
Yeah, I'm quite sure that a quorum is necessary for Congress to take a vote. I know that a quorum is not necessary for someone to give a speech or make an argument. In fact, that happens all the time. You'll see, you look on C-SPAN and you see, Bernie or Dick Durbin or somebody standing there at the well of the Senate giving an impassioned speech that looks like they're talking to thousands of people. And then you get the wide shot and there's like nobody in the room, or three people. So a quorum is not necessary for an awful lot of what the Senate does, but it is necessary for votes.
So if thoughtful Congress people said we're not going to participate in any vote until the president does something?
I don't think there's anything he can do, Moss. He has revealed himself to be a xenophobe, a racist, and frankly, a moron.
Well, I agree with all that, although I'm not really into calling anybody names. I'm not concerned about his...
I'm talking about moron as in the clinical definition, somebody who's got an IQ below 100.
Yeah. Oh, no, I'm not defending. Okay.
He's like, I'm really smart, right? I went to Wharton. No, you didn't get an MBA from Wharton. Come on, give me a break. Anyhow, Moss, I get your point. Thank you for the call. I'm sorry we're hitting the break here. We'll be back with more of Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann program right after this.
On April 15, 1949, Pacifica Radio KPFA 94.1 FM, Berkeley, California, went on the air for the first time, introducing listener-sponsored community radio to America. One of the most influential women of the 20th century, Ms. Gloria Steinem.
We have a unique reproductive function, and in order to control the number of workers, the number of soldiers, what race they are, what class they are, who they belong to, and systems of marriage or legitimacy, patriarchy was born. The definition of patriarchy is to control women's bodies.
Gloria Steinem from 1997, part of Voices of Pacifica series back in the 90s. Did you know that you can get most any of the 50,000 Pacifica broadcasts in our collection? Visit us online at pacificaradioarchives.org and help support the Archives mission to preserve Pacifica's broadcast legacy.
Welcome to the Million Color Revolution.
I did mention there were a couple of other things I wanted to talk about. Let me get to them very quickly. Yesterday or today, it was yesterday, right, Nate? The 11th? Yeah, yesterday was the 16th anniversary of Gitmo and the indefinite detention of these people at Guantanamo illegally. I mean, this is a violation of international law. In my opinion, it's a violation of U.S. law. It was the beginning of George W. Bush taking us down the road to no longer being the United States that I thought I grew up in, and I think that the people who organized this country had some belief in those values of the Enlightenment and all that. And the event that Nate did, it's got a little booklet. It says there's a man under that hood in solidarity with prisoners at Guantanamo Bay, past and present. Beautiful poem in the back of it. I can't take the time to read the whole thing, but there's just, And Guantanamo, by the numbers, as of December of last year, as of last month, 780 is the total number of detainees who've been held at Gitmo. 700 have been released, most without ever having been charged after being detained for years. 26, minimum number of prisoners who were tortured before being transferred to Gitmo. 21, the number of children imprisoned at Gitmo. Remember, was it John Yoo? I'm pretty sure it was, or Jay Bybee. It was one of them who said crushing the testicles of the son of a prisoner in front of him is an effective way to interrogate him. 9 is the number of Guantanamo detainees who died while in custody, 7 presumed by suicide. $10 million is the cost to house a detainee for 1 year in Gitmo. And we have 5 prisoners in Gitmo who long ago were cleared for release, and Trump won't let them go. It's amazing. It's shocking. It's just absolutely shocking. And also, wanted to let you know, we just organized this yesterday, laid it down yesterday. Code Pink had, the great activist group, codepink.org is their website. And Code Pink is organizing a trip to Cuba, February 25 to March 4, and Louise and I are going along. And so, they've extended. It was supposed to close yesterday, but they've extended it until next Tuesday. If you would like to participate in this trip, you can probably find it at codepink.org at their website. But there's a very specific link for the trip. And I sent a note this morning to Louise and to Nigel asking them to be sure to put it up at the top of our website at thomhartmann.com, because it's a longer link than I can read on the air. I assume that either Louise or Nigel did that. If they haven't, they will shortly. And so if you'd like to join us, hang out, we'll have a lot of fun. And I've never been to Cuba. I'm really looking forward to it. So that's some of the housekeeping stuff for some of the events that are going on. The Code Pink site, by the way, is codepink.org/travel_with_codepink, all lowercase. So that'll get you there. Todd in Ramsey, Minnesota. Hey, Todd, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Tom. I just want to make a comment about Trump's hate speech. If there's any doubt in anyone's mind that there was racism at its root, all you have to do is look just a little bit past the most offensive part of the statement, where Trump continues and says, why don't we have more immigrants from Norway?
Right.
Why on earth would he choose Norway out of all the countries in the world? He picks Norway off the top of his head, like we have people lined up from Norway trying to come to America.
Yeah, no, it's kind of the other way around. My grandfather and grandmother were both from Norway, and thanks, Todd. I'm sorry, I'm getting a feedback off your phone. Both my grandparents on my father's side literally were Norwegian immigrants. And when George Bush was elected, before I was doing this show, Louise and I were living in Vermont. We were retired. We had sold a business. And I contacted the Norwegian embassy and said, if things go the way I think they're going here in the United States, I'd like to move to Norway. What do I have to do? And they were like, well, first you have to be proficient in Norwegian, which my grandparents refused to teach my father, and therefore my father couldn't teach me. And then the rules got even harder after that. So I was like, okay, I can't move to Norway. But I don't know that Norwegians want to move here either. In fact, I tweeted this this morning. It was either early this morning or late last night. I woke up in the middle of the night around midnight, between midnight and 2. I think I tweeted a couple times. Basically saying, I can't imagine anybody. I lived for a year in Germany. My grandparents are from Norway on my father's side. And I know a lot of Europeans. We have 2 Europeans who work with us on this show. And I'm back in Europe literally every year. I've worked with this German charity since 1978, and I get back to Germany. Well, it's not every year, sometimes every other year, but I'm in Europe constantly, and I don't know any Europeans who would give up free college education, high quality public schools, world-class infrastructure with bullet trains and inexpensive public transportation that really works well, free medical care, instantaneous, no charge ever, a quality of life that's breathtaking, some of the longest lifespans on the planet. I don't know any European, and low inequality, very few homeless people, very little poverty. In Switzerland, there's literally not even one slum. I don't know any Europeans who would trade Europe for the blank hole that Ronald Reagan and the Republican Party have tried to turn this country into over the last 35 years.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Anyhow, we're totally slammed with your calls. We'll pick them up after the break. Stick around. The Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from League of the Iroquois by Lewis Henry Morgan. This was first published in 1851, the same decade that Charles Darwin published Origin of Species. This was a big deal at the time. And when there were still, Iroquois be talked with and whatnot. So this is, living the way that they were living. So this is from page 89, Structure of the League. This is just basically how the Iroquois Confederacy was put together in kind of an anthropological perspective. In connection with the power of the tribes to designate the sachems, those are the wise elders, should be noticed the equal power of deposition. If by misconduct a sachem lost the confidence and respect of his tribe and became unworthy of authority, a tribal council at once deposed him. Having selected a successor, summoned a council of the league to perform the ceremony of his investiture. Still further to illustrate the characteristics of the tribes of the Iroquois, some reference to their mode of bestowing names would not be inapt. Soon after the birth of an infant, the near relatives of the same tribe select a name. At the first subsequent council of the nation, the birth and name are publicly announced, together with the name and tribe of the father and the name and tribe of the mother. In each nation, the proper names were so strongly marked by a tribal peculiarity that the tribe of the individual could usually be determined from the name alone. Making as they did a part of their language, they were all significant. When an individual was raised up as a sachem, his original name was laid aside, and that of the sachemships was itself assumed. In like manner, at the raising up of a chief, the council of the nation, which performed the ceremony, took away the former name of the incipient chief and assigned him a new one, perhaps like Napoleon's titles, commemorative of the event which led to its bestowment. Thus, when the celebrated Red Jacket was elevated by election to the dignity of a chief, its original name, O Titai Nani I, always ready, was taken from him, and in his place was bestowed Sagoye Wat Ha, keeper awake, in allusion to the powers of his eloquence. Each tribe in the nation thus formed a species of separate community. The members of all were all of consanguinity, and all their relationships are easily traced. In like manner, those of the same tribe in each of the other nations were their consanguinee, and their relationships, near and remote, were also traceable. As two tribes were necessarily joined in each family, there was a perfect diffusion of tribes throughout the nation and throughout the league. So whenever somebody got married, they had to marry somebody from a different tribe. It's remarkable. In this manner, the race of the Iroquois, although consisting of different nations, was blended into one people. The League was in effect established and rested for its stability upon the natural faith of kindred. It now remains to define a tribe of the Haudenosaunee of the Iroquois. From the preceding considerations, it sufficiently appears that it was not, like the Grecian and Roman, a circular group of families, for two tribes were necessarily represented in every family. Neither, like the Jewish, was it constituted of the lineal descendants of a common father, on the contrary, it distinctly involved the idea of descent from a common mother. Nor has it any resemblance to the Scottish clan or the Canton or the Switzer. In the formation of an Iroquois tribe, a portion was taken from many households and bound together by a tribal bond. The wife, her children, and her descendants in the female line would in perpetuity be linked to the destinies of her own tribe, while the husband, his brother, and sisters, and the descendants of the latter in the female line would in like manner be united to another tribe and led by its affiliates. Or affinities. Herein was a bond of union between the several tribes of the same nation, corresponding in some degree with the cross relationship founded upon consanguinity, which bound together the tribes of the same emblem in the different nations. The Iroquois claimed to have originated the idea of a division of the people into tribes as a means of creating new relationships by which to bind the people more firmly together. It is further asserted by them that they forced or introduced this social organization among the Cherokees, the Chippeways, the Mississaugas, and several other Indian nations with whom in ancient times they were in constant intercourse. The fact that this division of the people of the same nation into tribes does not prevail generally among our Indian races favors the assertion of the Iroquois. On the other hand, the laws of descent, at least of the crown, among the Aztecs, dimly shadows forth the existence of a similar social organization, which may have been reproduced among the Iroquois or preserved through a remote affinity of blood. At all events, it was the life and strength of the Iroquois League. Of the comparative value of these institutions when contrasted with those of civilized country and of their capability of elevating the race, it is not necessary here to inquire. It was the boast of the Iroquois that the great object of their confederacy was peace, to break up the spirit of perpetual warfare which had wasted the red race from age to age. Such an insight into the true end of all legitimate government by those who constructed this tribal league excites as great surprise as admiration. It is the highest and noblest aspect in which human institutions can be viewed, and the thought itself, universal peace among Indian races, possible of attainment, was a ray of intellect from no ordinary mind. To consummate such a purpose, the Iroquois nation were to be concentrated into one political fraternity, in a manner effectively to prevent offshoots and secessions. By its natural growth, this fraternity would accumulate sufficient power, and then they go on by affiliation to merge everything into one common family. A remarkable book written in 1851, League of the Iroquois, Lewis Henry Morgan.
Learn all about the Thom Hartmann podcast at thomhartmann.com/podcast. They're commercial free, and you can listen anytime, any place you want.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. John D. Feely is the U.S. ambassador to Cuba. Well, I should say was the U.S. ambassador to Cuba. Following Donald Trump's obscene comments yesterday, he just resigned. He said, I can no longer, in good conscience, serve in the Trump administration as the ambassador to Panama. Amazing. Dion in Round Lake, Illinois. Hey, Dion, what's on your mind today?
Tom, yeah, Trump has IQ under 100. I bet he plays a smart guy only on TV.
Yeah, it seems. He's certainly not doing it in the White House.
There's an animated film that's out called Bird Boy, The Forgotten Children, about, it's set on a remote island that used to be thriving, and it was decimated by an industrial blast. And then yesterday we had Courier laying off people. We had Sam's Club laying off people. So do you think Donald Trump is going to turn this country into a crab hole if the economy crashes on him?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's what's happening. I mean, you've got several, and thank you for moderating your obscenity. You've got several companies, a number of companies who are saying, yeah, we're gonna. In fact, before I tell this story, let me get back to John D. Rockefeller. John D. Rockefeller was widely hated in the United States in the 19-teens. He had Teddy Roosevelt going after him. He controlled the price of kerosene, which everybody was using for heat and for light. He was just, widely reviled, and he was obscenely rich. He was one of the morbidly rich in that era. And so he hired a PR guy, and the PR guy said, what you need to do is get a roll of brand new shiny dimes and go out on the street in front of your headquarters and pass them out to all the street urchins, all the kids who are out there begging, because we had such widespread poverty in the United States and in New York City at the time that you couldn't walk down the street without kids begging for money from you. And so Rockefeller did that. He got a camera crew or an illustrator or reporters or whatever. However he publicized it, got a lot of publicity, and he got a lot of good PR for it. John Rockefeller has a heart of gold. He's giving not brand new shiny dimes to kids, and a dime back then was worth maybe $3 now. So it was not inconsequential. But essentially, that's what these companies are doing, is they're saying, okay, we're going to give to some of our employees, Walmart, to the employees that have been there more than 20 years, we're going to give them a shiny dime, and then we're going to take, dollars and dollars and dollars from them, which is what John Rockefeller was doing. And we're seeing this in company after company. Sure, we'll give a bonus, and we're going to publicize that, and then we're going to lay a bunch of people off. And that's what's going on. Well said, Dion. Randy in Ottawa, Iowa. Hey, Randy, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Good day, sir.
Thank you. Back at you.
I hope I can. This is kind of a complicated scenario that I see going on with Trump, and I'm not really going to comment. I think that's a Tourette's moment of a mentally ill man, a moment where he just broke.
I disagree. I strongly disagree. I don't think that was Tourette's at all.
You think it's dog whistle then, huh?
I think he's reflecting his core beliefs. This is a man whose father was arrested at a Ku Klux Klan rally. This is a guy who was prosecuted in his 20s when he was renting properties in New York City for refusing to rent to black people. He had his employees put the letter C on any application filled in by a person of color, for color. Yeah. This is a guy who has a long history, of I mean, look at the Central Park Five. You've got these 5 young black men who were charged with raping and killing this woman, and the DNA and got arrested. The DNA evidence came back, and it turned out it wasn't any of them. They had nothing to do with it, and they found in their jail a convicted rapist whose DNA matched. And when they went to him and said, did you do this? He said, yeah. He confessed. He totally confessed to it. So we know who the Central Park killer was and the rapist was. And after all that came out, Donald Trump is still calling for the death penalty for those 5 young black men.
Well, Tom, I disagree with you. And I think that a guy can be a racist, a long-lived racist.
And look at all his rants about Barack Obama not even being born in the United States. Come on, that's code for... Have you noticed he's a black man?
What's going on today? What's going on today in the last week is that if you look at this in context with what happened in Iran-Contra, and I was reminded of this in this new movie out with Tom about Barry Seals, The American Made. It is entertaining and it is informative both, and condensed that makes you see it in an easy fashion to read or to understand. So when you look at what's going on with Trump, he has a Camp David retreat where he has all the Republicans there. Within 2 days, he has the DACA thing where, what's her name from California asked for a clean DACA bill.
Right.
And he can't even stay on message that long. And McCarthy reels him in and gets him back on message because without the Republicans keeping him on message, he can't stay on message.
Yeah.
And the thing is that they're holding his ticket because if they quit backing him, he's going down through the Mueller investigation. So the thing is that I think it's time for the 25th Amendment, Tom. I think that any man that incites violence within this country in a civil war or what's coming with his reckless, self-serving, superior behavior it's reprehensible, and it's time for the 25th Amendment, sir.
I don't disagree, Randy.
I think he's mentally ill.
I do too, and I think it's been going on for a while, and I think, frankly, he's suffering from dementia. If you've ever watched somebody experience dementia, and I have, and probably most people who are in their 60s have known somebody who became demented or whatever the word is, who experienced dementia.
Yep.
Whether it's Alzheimer's or just, vasocerebral dementia or whatever the cause may be. What you find is that the thing that endures through it all is the core of their personality. That, they lose dates, they lose names, they lose places, they lose, the news of the day, they forget where and when they are, but they know what they believe. They know their core convictions. And I think that's what we're seeing. Donald Trump should have been smart enough to know he's sitting in a room both with Republicans who will tolerate this, apparently, but also with Democrats. Dick Durbin was in that room. And any person with any sense at all would have known this is suicide, this is political suicide. Setting aside the fact that, it's obscene and immoral and wrong. But he was not self-aware enough to even, or capable of what in psychology is called executive function, the ability to regulate yourself, the ability to restrain yourself, the ability to have some control over your own words and behaviors. He was unable to do that. It's amazing.
It's, can I say one thing?
Yeah, real quick, Randy, please.
There is a coincidence here between what happened with Reagan and his Alzheimer's, and how the Republicans and the CIA and stuff exploited him through that time.
Oh yeah,
and the military exploited him, and what's going on today with Trump, and how they're going to enable Trump to exploit him to get what they want.
Well, what happened with Reagan? A friend of mine deposed Ronald Reagan, or was part of the team that deposed Ronald Reagan in the Iran-Contra thing, where 186 times, as I recall.
Hearings.
Yeah, he said, "I don't remember." No, this was in closed session. This was not any public hearing, and she said he was president at the time, and she said he wasn't there. He kept forgetting what room he was in. He kept forgetting what the topic was. He couldn't remember the names of the lawyers, including his own lawyer. Ronald Reagan, in the last couple of years of his presidency, was exhibiting signs of Alzheimer's. And what the Republican Party did and what the White House did is they kept him away from the press, unless it was tightly scripted, and they let George Herbert Walker Bush basically run the show. And none of that is happening right now. Donald Trump wouldn't tolerate Mike Pence running the show, and he won't tolerate getting out of the limelight. And so we're getting to see what got hidden from us in the case of Reagan. But I don't disagree with you. I think that there's some comparisons to be made there.
Check out, if you have the time, that American Made, the Barry Seals movie.
Okay.
It's great.
I'll look for it, Randy.
I loved it.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for the call, Randy. Good to talk to you. Jackie in Lake Forest, North Carolina. Hey, Jackie, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. I was just curious about something about President Oprah. That if that were to happen, would Stedman be the first gentleman? They're not married.
President Oprah. Oh, gee, I don't have any idea. I guess actually we had one president who was not married. In fact, the best speculation is that he was gay. Was that Polk?
Who was that?
I'm forgetting who it was. But, there's a broad consensus that we had a gay president, and he had a niece who's, as I recall, her name was Nancy. Could be wrong on that, too. It might have been that they called him Nancy, because that was a slur for gay people at the time. But in any case, his niece served in the White House as the First Lady throughout his presidency. So, yeah, I think it's entirely possible if Oprah was to become president, that the first dude or the first husband or whatever would be her boyfriend, Mr. Stedman.
I just wonder if the religious right would be horrified that our president was living in sin in the White House.
I think they'd be far more horrified if we're talking about the white evangelical movement in the United States by the fact that A, you had another black president, B, she's a black woman, and she has power. Women, by and large, are not allowed power in much of the Christian community, certainly the Catholic Church, and parts of the evangelical community. And C, that she was living with a white man. I believe Stedman's white, right? I'm pretty sure. Maybe not.
It's hard to tell.
Maybe. Yeah. Okay. I don't. I don't know that much about Oprah or Stedman. I guess I just assumed that. I shouldn't say that, but I think that they would be far more concerned about her race, frankly, than whether she's living in sin. But that would be another hit on her.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to see a President Oprah or even a serious challenge. It's a great topic for speculation and fantasy and imagination. I think she might do amazing things as president, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Jackie, thanks for the call. Good talking with you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And our probably gay president was James Buchanan. My apologies to Mr. Polk. Well, not my apologies. Hey, there's nothing wrong with being gay. We'll be right back. I'm not hearing myself. There we go. Yeah, Larry, hang on. I'll be getting to you right after this next break. Jesse in Miami, Florida. Hey, Jesse, what's up?
Hey, hi, Tom. Hey, thanks for being in the belly of the beast. I know you know where I'm coming from. So let me ask you a tougher question that's going to put you in the belly of the beast. Haiti, is they the only country that has been made to pay back for their freedom?
That's a good question. You're talking about the Haitian Revolution of 17, whatever it was,
1802 or 3 or 4, around there.
Yeah. It was during the founding era. Yeah. I don't know. We borrowed money from France to fight the American Revolutionary War, and we repaid that money. So maybe not. But I know, and it's been a while since I've read this stuff, Jesse. I'm sorry I'm not right on top of it, but I believe that the conditions under which Haiti both borrowed money and had to repay money were pretty onerous. It wasn't just, hey, you have to give us back the money. It was like, you've got to surrender part of your sovereignty, and you've got to give us, this, that, and the other thing. Perhaps you know better than me.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jesse. Good talking with you. David in Greenfield, California? Or is it Greenfield?
It's Greenfield.
Greenfield.
Hey, Tom, Happy New Year.
Thank you. Back at you.
I wanted to talk about voter security from Russian meddling.
Mm-hmm.
All of these committees that we're supposed to be going through, making sure that everything is, secure at our voter registration offices are, all closing down, it sounds like, because Republicans don't really want to deal with any of this. And it seems very, disturbing to me that they're not going to, do anything to firewall any of this before they shut down all these committees.
Well, in 2002, when the Republicans promoted the Help America Vote Act and put it into law and handed $6 billion to the states to buy voting machines from private, for-profit, Republican-affiliated corporations, suddenly in that and subsequent elections, we started seeing something called redshift, which was where the individual states that were deciding elections or critical states for senatorial elections suddenly started electing Republicans in ways that the exit polls said were not accurate. And up until that point, up until 2002, we had used exit polls as the gold standard. We were able to call elections even before the votes were counted based on election polls. All over the world, people do this. In Germany, it takes a couple of days to count the ballots. They're all paper. They call the election at the, right after the election's over because of the exit polls. Same thing in the UK. Same thing in most countries. But suddenly, our exit polls stopped working so badly that by 2012, the exit polling companies, by and large, went out of business in terms of presidential predictions. And so I think that it may be that the Republicans are not so concerned about Russian hacking or even enthusiastic about it. I think, frankly, they're doing their own damn hacking. And we need to secure our election systems against Republicans, in my opinion. David, thank you for the call. We'll be right back. So one of the things I said at the very beginning of the hour, and I might have just kind of slid past your consciousness, but I want to highlight it, is that I believe that Trump's comments yesterday, as much as the corporate media, the mainstream media, whatever you want to call it, the liberal press, MSNBC, CNN, are assuming, NPR, assuming that everybody's horrified, shocked by what Trump said. I think his base loves it. I think his base is essentially racist. His base actually believes in white superiority and supremacy. And, they're going to say, hey, this is just, isn't he just telling the truth? So, let's see what people have to say. Larry in Lancaster, California. Hey, Larry, what's up?
Hey, Tom, a little while ago you said how hard it would be for you to go back to your country from where your ancestors are from, and that Europeans don't want to come over here because they have it so good. So in a way, isn't what Trump said kind of true? The only immigrants that want to come here come from bad countries that have problems.
There are poor countries filled with white people, Larry. Countries that are dysfunctional, countries that are falling about. Look at Kazakhstan. Look at half a dozen of the Stan countries, or however many there are. I mean, there's lots of. Those were not the countries that Trump was referring to as crap holes, or whatever you want to call it. Blank holes.
Africa have plenty of white people there too. He ain't talking just about
not majority white people. Okay, Larry, your defense of Trump is noted. Luke in Lafayette, Louisiana. Hey, Luke, thanks for listening to Sirius XM. Your thoughts?
Oh, thanks, Tom. Yeah, I think you're probably right about most people not really minding him describing these countries like that. Most people that vote for him anyway, which, is probably what counts over that popular vote. The Electoral College is what got him elected. And, the people that he, spoke to on the campaign trail are happy with it. You can call us racist, and I don't mind that. I kind of like better when y'all call us deplorable, because that makes me think, well, they're not just covering, one bad thing. They're covering all. They're saying we're against gays, we're against blacks, we're against, and, I don't think that any of that's true, but I'm kind of worn it as a badge of honor.
So you wear as a badge of honor that you are a racist, a homophobe, and a misogynist? Am I getting this right, Luke?
I wear as a badge of honor you calling me that. I think it's wonderful that y'all hang yourselves into this corner where y'all have to call us names. Y'all can't debate us on the merits.
Well, those are not names. Terrible. Those are not proper nouns. Those are actual descriptions, adjectives. If you are tolerant of racism, you're a racist. If you're tolerant of misogyny, you're a misogynist. If you're tolerant of bigotry, you're a bigot. I don't understand, Luke, why you would be proud of that.
Well, I'm not any of those things, really. But the fact that you say I am just gives me more credibility that I'm right. Because, y'all judge everything on a fictional scale. Y'all say that if a man wants to judge things on merit, the content of their character, and not the color of their skin, then we're racist. So I can't say that these places are bad because they are bad. You're saying that I have to say they're good because they got black people in them, or they got Spanish people, or whoever. I can't say that these places are bad. That makes me racist.
Yeah.
See, you prove my point every time you say I'm a racist, and I love it.
And I don't understand your point, then, Luke. I'm missing some outside of the fact that you're pleased that I'm identifying you as a racist and a misogynist and a bigot.
Hey, that's how y'all lost. I love it when y'all do that. Y'all gonna lose every time like that because people are wise to it.
Well, racists and misogynists and bigots are wise to it. I get it. We're turning into voting blocks in this country between tolerant people and intolerant people, and it sounds like you're proud to be one of those intolerant people. Do I have that right?
Well, I'm intolerant of accepting.
Tolerance is a liberal value, Luke. Are you a liberal?
I'm a liberal in the sense I believe people should be free to do what's right, and that we shouldn't be henpecked on language we use if there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, I don't like the profanity, quite honestly, but it's everywhere in our society. We're all using profanity for people to have selective outrage about this guy's language. Really, it's funny to me. I giggle every time I hear y'all straight face on the radio or on TV saying, "Oh, he said a bad word. He said a bad word."
Yeah.
It's great. It's great.
Yeah. Luke, you're making my point. And thank you for doing so. As I said when I started, I really believe the Trump supporters who deep down in their hearts believe that because they're white, they're superior to everybody else, are going to be cheering Donald Trump on in what he said. I mean, this is the proof of what Lyndon Johnson said about the strategy of the Republican Party. He said if they can convince the poorest, lowest white man that he's superior to the highest black man, they'll let the Republicans pick their pockets for the rest of their lives. And you're apparently one of those people, Luke. Thank you very much. Kenyatta in Redlands, California. Hey, Kenyatta, what's on your mind?
Happy New Year, Tom.
Back at you.
I wanted to talk a little bit about Mr. Trump's comments.
Okay, my apologies, Kenyatta. We only have 40 seconds.
Oh, wow. Look, racism is, Trump is not the problem. Trump is a symptom.
Yep.
Trump is an orange carcinoma. The body of the United States has a malignant cancer that has metastasized for 400 years, and that cancer is racism, and ultimately cancer will kill its host.
Yes. And frankly, I think we're looking at one of two things. Either we're going to go down kind of a Mussolini road, or we're going to reboot and we're going to go down an FDR road. And I have always believed that we were going to reboot and go down the FDR road. I wrote a whole book about it, the crash of 2016. But I'm not 100% certain.
I think the former is going to be true, but let's hope I'm wrong.
Yes, let's hope you're wrong. But I understand exactly where you're coming from, Kenyatta. Thanks. It's always great to hear from you. Thank you for the call. We'll be back with more of Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann program. Your thoughts on, well, we've got a bunch of the news of the day. We also have a poll, our poll from yesterday over at YouTube. Julian Assange was granted citizenship by Ecuador. Good idea? I'll tell you the results right after this.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.